Good evening. It's good to see everyone this evening. Glad that you made it. We're kind of thin tonight, but Super Bowl Sunday, right? I think. I don't know. I quit watching football, so I don't know anymore. Moving into Revelation 14 and 15, probably try to do those tonight and kind of set us up for the starting of the bowls in 16. So we've talked quite a bit, talked a lot about Revelation, a lot about what these things mean. I hope that if it's not clear to you, I hope it's not scary to you anymore. I will say that. So I hope that we gradually work our way where we kind of understand what's going on here. There were 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls, right? And we've been through the seals. We opened the last trumpet in Revelation 11, blew the last trumpet. Then we're in an interlude before the bowls will open in chapter 16. So from 12, 13, 14, 15 is the interlude between the trumpets and the bowls. That's where we're at, setting that stage about what's going to happen, setting the stage of our players. Talked about the dragon, Satan, last Sunday night. Talked about the first beast, which is Rome. Talked about the second beast, which is emperor worship. Talked about these different players that are being introduced as we get towards this climax of the book, actually, as we get into the pouring out of the bowls. So as we get into Revelation chapter 14, we get into this. I'm going to get back there. Hold on. We begin to look now and set the stage for, basically this end before we pour out these bowls. And in Revelation 14, it says, I looked and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion. Now this beast that come up kind of looked like a lamb, although kind of a warped lamb, but kind of looked like a lamb, right? But this beast that came up out of the sea, this Roman Empire, but now we see this Lamb, Christ. We know who the Lamb is, right? We see Christ, and he's standing on Mount Zion. That's a big thing to the Jews, and should be to us when we see this. With 144,000 having his name, this is the same 144,000 we looked at in chapter 7. All of those, not necessarily just the martyred, I think, but all those who believe. 144,000, we talked a lot about numbers. I hope you start to see this as we go. And we talked about that number, multiples of 12. 12 times 12 is 144. 144,000 is a perfectly large number, not necessarily not a literal 144,000. We can't just pick out in Revelations, oh, that's going to be literal, that's not going to be literal. I mean, I think if we're going to say it's figurative, we need to stick with the idea that it's figurative. I heard a voice from heaven like the sound of many waters, like the sound of loud thunder, and the voice I heard was like the sound of harpists. And once again in Revelation, as you read this, especially when you get into here, like the sound of harpists, like the voice, like this, like that. It's all descriptive. Doesn't mean they're harpists. It's like the sound of that. So it's kind of interesting in that, and he's just playing on things we know. They sang a new song before the throne, before the 4 living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 were purchased from the earth. These are the ones who have not been defiled with women, for they have kept themselves chaste. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased from among men as first fruits to God and to the Lamb, and no lie was found in their mouth. They are blameless. So when we look at Zion, Zion is the city of God. That's the best way I know how to tell you. Doesn't necessarily, we always think about it being Jerusalem because Jerusalem was the city of God. David stood on Mount Zion. Originally was the stronghold of David. So that's what Zion is. So when we sing that song, oh Zion, Zion, along thy gates to see, we're really talking about heaven because now Zion is heaven. It's the city of God. So it's where God dwells in Jewish thought. Zion is where God dwells. And so when we talk about Zion here, we're talking about the city where God dwells. So when it says, I looked to behold the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, that's Christ, standing on the Mount of God, which is in heaven right now. So that's what Zion relates to. It represents Jehovah's dwelling among God's people. The people's help and strength would come forth out of Zion, the psalmist said in Psalms 20, verse 2. So it really fits in along with that. Isaiah 6:13, it said, provide for those who grieve in Zion to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil and joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called mighty oaks, a planting of the Lord, for the display of his splendor. So Zion is where Christ is. It's in heaven now. Zion's where God dwells. The Lamb is standing on Zion. He's not slain on Zion. He's not injured on Zion. He's powerful. He's healed. He's complete. He appears as one who's been slain, and we talked about that in Revelation 5 a little bit. And so he's the one who we see. Hebrews 12 says, you've come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. So if you look at the Hebrew writer, he really refers to that now. Zion's a heavenly Jerusalem. Zion's in heaven. So we see that, and I think that's a very powerful statement. The 144,000 we talked about are the same as those sealed in chapter 7. It says, nevertheless, God's solid foundation stands firm, sealed with this inscription, the Lord knows those who are his, and everyone who confesses the name of the Lord must turn away from wickedness. So once again, God sealed them. He knows them. These aren't necessarily just the slain. We talked about that in Revelation 7. These are all those righteous, and these are the ones who have not defiled themselves with, it says not defiled themselves with women, but I really think, once again, what does it say? What does it mean? 2 Corinthians, God says, I'm jealous for you with a godly jealousy. I promised you to one husband, to Christ, so that I might present you as a pure virgin to him. So it not necessarily means they've never been with a woman. I don't think that's what this verse really means. It means that they've never been untrue to Christ, okay? In other words, here in 2 Corinthians, it says we have one husband. The church has one husband, that is Christ. So these people have not defiled themselves. They're still the true. These are the true church, the true redeemed, the ones who have not defiled themselves, who have not forsaken Christ, the 144,000 we looked at in chapter 7, and that becomes these that we're talking about here when we talk about these have not laid themselves, women have not defiled themselves, they're found blameless. And then we have 3 angels, okay? So, I think after you go through the beasts of chapter 13, you get into 14, we look at Zion, the Lamb standing. That should be reassuring. Christ is in control. Christ is on the throne, right? Christ is in Zion. The 144,000, we bring them back up that have been redeemed. God knows them. So reassurance, reassurance, reassurance. But now we have these 3 angels. And these 3 angels are going to do 3 things. In verse 6 it says, I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven, having an eternal gospel to preach to those who live on the earth, and to every nation and tribe and tongue and people. And he said with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heaven and the earth, and sea and springs of waters. And another angel, the second one, followed, saying, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. And another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast in his image and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed full strength in the cup of his anger. He'll be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, those who worship the beast, his image, and whoever receives a mark of his name. Here is the perseverance of the saints, who keeps the commandments of God and their faith in Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on, yes, in the Spirit. They may rest from their labor, for their deeds follow them. So we begin to get into these angels. In Revelation chapter 7, the first angel says, fear God, give him glory, because the hour of judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens and the earth, the sea and the springs of water. So the first angel is making proclamation to God, to give glory to God. In Revelation 14:8, it says, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. Babylon was a city that the Jews understood. That's who conquered Jerusalem the first time, was the Babylonians. So whenever we talk about Babylon, it's kind of like saying Jezebel. okay? Whenever you talk about Babylon, you know that it's evil, and it's an evil city. And here, that evil city is Rome. But once again, what does it say? What does it mean? Babylon no longer exists. Not talking about Babylon. What does it say? What does it mean, right? If we say, well, that person's a Jezebel, we know they're not literally Jezebel. We know they're just an evil person, right? That's kind of how we say that. So when we say this Babylon the Great, that's what we're talking about is Rome. She made all the nations drink of the wine of her immorality. The third angel says, once again, we've talked about this, not a literal mark, right? What does it say? What does it mean? Imagery. They're going to drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength. So that third angel is this judgment that's going to come. In Revelation 14:13, it says, I heard a voice from heaven saying, right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. And I think that's a bad translation. It's something we use a lot. We hear that at funerals. But I believe the proper translation of that would be not blessed are the dead who die from this point in history on, but blessed are the dead who die in the Lord after the Lord came. In other words, it goes back. It's not just saying from this point forward. It's something that encompasses all people and all of us. Because we can rest from our labors, and our deeds will follow. We talked about that some in class this morning, the idea of our deeds following after us. And then after we have these angels, then we have the reapers. So the warning's been poured out. The reapers come in 14. A white cloud, sitting on the cloud, was one like the Son of Man, having a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. Another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice, put your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. Then he who sat on the cloud swung a sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple, and he also had a sharp sickle. And another angel, the one who has the power over fire, came out of the altar, called with a loud voice, had the sharp sickle, saying, put in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters from the vine of the earth, because their grapes are ripe. So the angel swung the sickle to the earth and gathered the clusters of the vine from the earth, and threw them into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and the blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 200 miles. Okay, that gets kind of interesting when we get a little bit more into this. There's two harvests, okay? There's a harvest of the righteous by Christ, and there's a righteous of the wicked. It's speaking of judgment. He just said Babylon's going to be trodden. We know the bowls are coming. We know God's wrath is coming. God's saying, listen, there's going to be two harvests. There's going to be a harvest of the righteous and a harvest of the wicked. And in that harvest, these two things are these angels are going to reap that. Now, what gets confusing, and a lot of people who try to take Revelation literally, we talk about this blood came from the winepress up to the horses' bridles for a distance of 200 miles. Well, that's about 4 foot deep in blood for 200 miles. Now, Valverde and some of them who take this literally believe there'll be horses up to the bridle, there'll be blood up to the horse of a bridle. But once again, this is a figurative book, right? Not literal. So we're not looking for 200 miles of blood 4 feet deep. That's a lot of blood. I don't know if there's that much blood on the earth. Maybe there is, but I kind of doubt it, right? So we're not looking at this literal. So what's he mean? He means, listen, when this angel comes to destroy these wicked, to reap these wicked, it's going to be a tremendous judgment, right? We're not talking about just a little bit. We're not talking about a few. Some people say, well, the wicked escape judgment. The wicked will just perish. Their soul will be destroyed. And it's places like this in the Bible that don't back that up. They say just as much as there'll be a reward, a righteous reaping, a righteous gathering, as we talk about in Revelation, so there's going to be a reaping of the unrighteous. They're not going to go unpunished, is what this is saying. They're not going to go unpunished. The wicked are going to be punished. The righteous are going to be rewarded. That's kind of what God wants to drive home in here, and what John wants to drive home to these people in the book of Revelation. Because these people are persecuted. These people have been persecuted by Rome. These people are undergoing severe persecution. And God wants them to know through John that, listen, this is all going to be fine. Judgment's going to happen. Things are going to happen. Vengeance is the Lord's. They're going to be punished. And the righteous are going to be rewarded, because we're getting to the bowls. When we start to pull out these bowls, we're going to start to pour out this wrath, and we're going to start to pull out this judgment. And before we get to doing that, God is wanting to say, listen, it's okay. All right? I got it. Christ is standing on Zion. Okay? Christ is reigning. There's going to be warning. There has been warning. Guess what? These angels are going to come. There's going to be a reckoning. There's going to be a judgment. But those who are sealed in God, those who have not defiled themselves and not turned away from the church, those are safe. God has them. But just as sure as God knows his own and is going to care for them, so also does God know those who have the mark of the beast, the mark of the unrighteous, and God's going to deal with them too. So make no mistake, God is going to make this right. God is going to settle the score. God's going to make this right. Things are going to be the way that they should. When we begin to look at 15, we begin to see in 15 the other sign in heaven. 7 angels, 7 plagues. This is the last. The wrath of God is finished. We see the sea of glass in Revelation 15 that we looked at earlier, like Revelation 11. We see the sea of glass, which is reminiscent of Solomon's glass sea before the temple of God. We see a new song in Revelation 15:3. They sang the song of Moses, the bondservant of God and of the Lamb. Whenever they sing a new song, it's because they're victorious. When they sang a song, when they crossed the sea, the Red Sea, Egypt, the armies of Egypt have been destroyed, and they sang a song, right? When Hannah became pregnant with Samuel, when she prayed for that, she sang a song. When Mary heard she was going to deliver Jesus, the Son of God, she sang a song, the Magnificat. So every time that we see that in the Bible, and here in 15, we're seeing this. Before we pull out the bowls, we take a look at heaven in 15, and they're singing a new song. That means things are going to be good, okay? Things are going to be good. Because when we sing new songs, it's because things are good, all right? So things are going to be good. And he says in 15:5, he says, I looked, and the temple of tabernacle of heaven was opened, where God and man, God's no longer separated from man. The 7 angels who had the 7 plagues come out, clothed linen clean and bright, girded around their chests with golden sashes. And one of the 4 living creatures gave to the 7 angels 7 golden bowls of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke and his power, and no one was able to enter the temple. So now we're to the bowls, okay? So basically in 15, we see the scene in heaven. We see the new song, which means things are good. The 7 angels show up, and they give them what? The 7 bowls, which is what we're going to start pouring out next Sunday night. In 16, we get the 7 bowls. We've had the seals. We've had the trumpets. Now we have the bowls, okay? So after this interlude of 4 chapters that we've gone through, we've introduced the beast, we've introduced the dragon, we've introduced the second beast, we saw the church that's unblemished, we saw Christ standing on the throne, we see judgment coming for the righteous, judgment coming for the wicked. All these things are set into place. And now we're going to take these 7 bowls next Sunday night, these 7 bowls of wrath, and we're going to start pouring these bowls out. And as we pour these bowls out, things are going to happen. So now we're getting to maybe what you would call maybe the hardest part of Revelation, maybe the most misunderstood part of Revelation. We start talking about the Battle of Armageddon, 1,000 years, and all these things that we're getting to that now. But rest assured, things are good, right? Things are good. And now we're going to start with these bowls. Things are going to get a little worse. So that's where we will next Sunday night. Thanks for your time this evening.